Welcome to the Petersen's Bowhunting Podcast. All bow hunting, all the time. Now, here's your host, Associate Editor Mark Demko.
So, hey everybody, welcome to the Bowhunting Podcast. As we're here today, it's mid-December, so we're just about ready to move into winter. We're transitioning out of all the fall, early winter hunting seasons. It's a time when a lot of people shift gears to predator hunting, and I am super excited. I have probably one of the most well-known predator hunters in North America on the podcast for us today. Fred Eichler. Fred, welcome to the program.
Thank you, sir. Appreciate that, Mark.
Yeah, now I've gotten to know you over the past couple of years working on our Predator Nation. Now, most people know that I'm involved with Petersen's Bowhunting and Crossbow Revolution, but I also work on Predator Nation. It's another one of the outdoor sportsman group brands, and you have 2-3 pieces in every issue, and I've just learned so much in reading all of your work. You in your current issue, you're going to have an article on putting up fur, and that was super exciting to me. That's something I've never done while I've predator hunted. I've never taken that step, so we're thrilled to have you on. And I think a good starter question for you is: now you live in Colorado. How did you get started hunting, and how did you get into bow hunting? Because I know bow hunting is one of your passions.
It is. Well, like a lot of people, my father was a passionate outdoorsman. So my father kind of got me into it, following him around. And, predators, and it's funny, the things that you remember in your mind. But I was very young, probably 7 to 8 years old, and I couldn't sit still like most 7 and 8-year-olds. And I was hunting with my dad, and he was trying to get me to sit still underneath a tree. And I was sitting there, and I was kind of grumpy. And, I'm sitting there looking around, and I saw movement. And I looked, and a bobcat had come out in this little opening we were watching, and it took off and chased a rabbit out of sight. And I was like, wow, that was the neatest thing, and it just blew me away. My dad was so excited I saw it. And so, I've always kind of been enthralled with, with any kind of hunting, really. But the predators, to me, are just fascinating. I started out predators, not only hunting predators, but trapping. Like a lot of people, in the country, I started out trapping predators, and that was where I learned not only a lot about predators and scents, and how amazing predators really are, and how they use different senses. Like bobcats use their eyes, more than their nose, whereas a coyote uses its nose a lot and its eyes. But interesting going through all the different predators, but then just calling them as well became a huge hobby of mine, and something that I wanted to perfect, which none of us will ever perfect it. But we get as far as we can, Mark.
Yeah. And obviously there are a lot of challenges when you go into hunting different species, but that you actually live in an incredible area as far as predator hunting, though. You have a wide variety that you can pursue out there in Colorado.
A lot of people have no idea, but Colorado, not only for big game, but for predators, Colorado's amazing. I mean, to start off with, we have 3 species of fox. We have red fox, swift fox, and gray fox. So I could literally go out in one night, and maybe by tweaking the area I go to 10 or 15 minutes one way or the other, I can have 3 species of fox. We also have raccoons. We have badger. We have bobcat. We have coyote. And then if I want to, skunks, of course, they've come into calls as well. And then if you want to jump it up to larger, we've got black bears and mountain lions. There's a few ringtail cats in the state of Colorado as well. So we have just a myriad of predators. And, I didn't even mention like pine martens, which is a smaller, predator, but we've got a ton of predators here. So if a guy's a avid predator hunter, there are very few places that have the variety of predators that we have here in Colorado. So it's a great place to not only learn about predators, but to get experience on all different types of predators and figuring out what sounds, strategies work best for the different species.
Yeah, and now you run your own family outfitting business, Full Draw Outfitters, where you have guys out hunting from archery season. Even now you have guys out for mule deer, for elk, and things like that. Do you have a fair number of clients who like to do some predator hunting when they're out there as well? I mean, obviously you're just renowned in the industry and in the field, so.
Well, I'm honored you say that. I'm just a guy that got into it and loves it a lot. But yeah, sometimes I used to take a few guys predator hunting, which is fun. But predator hunting is one of those things I kind of do for myself. I guide for the antelope, I guide for the elk and the mule deer and the whitetail and the black bear, turkeys and all that good stuff. But I found, I'm trying to think of the nice way to say this, Bart. I found I get frustrated sometimes taking guys predator hunting, and it's not their fault. But a lot of guys don't have a lot of experience, so it's easier to talk to them or teach them. Or I prefer hunting with people that are experienced predator hunters, because there's been multiple times I've taken guys out that, and it's fun to take people out and let them experience it. But I'm so dialed in on like, okay, we got 3 coyotes coming in. Let's take all 3 of them, and we got to shoot at the right spot. We have to be accurate on the run on the other ones. You have to choose which one to shoot first, second, third. And I've had a lot of occasions where I've taken guys out and they just get so excited, which I love that. But they start shooting while they're 250 yards away and still running right at you, and you're just like, ah. So I guide on some of the bigger predators. But really, the coyote hunting and the bobcats and the fox and the raccoons, that's usually just for me, my buddies. I do it for the show, and we're doing some just shot stuff for MOTV, as you know, which is pretty exciting. But I tend to take just buddies out on that. Sometimes I'll take clients out. I did take a client out the other day. He was out here on a hunt. I said, "Man, I've got a bunch of coyotes coming into baits, and I'm going to slip out. Do you want to go?" And he's like, "Heck yes, I'd love to go." So he went out, and I set him up with an ATN thermal I had for rifle, and he killed one and missed one, and I did the same. I actually shot 2 and missed 1 running, but we had a blast. So we shot 3 coyotes in one evening. So every once in a while I'll take them out, but that's a tough one sometimes, because you know how it is, Mark. Sometimes you get a little impatient.
No, I do. And I think it's a great way to segue into the next point. You're talking about you like to hunt with people who at least have some experience in predator hunting. I think when you think of hunting for coyotes, fox, bobcat, most people go with a firearm, whether it be a rifle or a shotgun. But you do a lot with bow, both with I think compound and crossbow. And in fact, you do a lot with the recurve. So you have a wealth of experience in archery hunting. And so that's probably a great topic for our podcast here, which is all archery focused. What is the point where you wanted to start going after predators with a bow and arrow? What made you switch there from a firearm to wanting to go with stick and string?
That's a great question. It's probably the natural progression that a lot of people take. In other words, if you fish with a bobber and a big earthworm and you catch some fish, you may next go, decide you want to try fly fishing. There's an art to fly fishing, and some people would say it's tougher, but once you get good fly fishing, well, sometimes you can catch fish other guys can't. And it was the same reason I went, with the majority of my hunting from a rifle to a bow. With a rifle, as soon as I saw the animal, it was like, well, it's in jeopardy, and with a bow, I got to watch that animal so much longer and learn more about it and try and apply my skills as a hunter, whether it was stalking, calling, using scent, camouflage, wind, terrain. That was the exciting part for me. So, as opposed to seeing an elk 300 yards away and shooting it with a rifle, with the bow, it was like, man, I've got to get a lot closer. And then with the recurve, it was like, man, I've got to get even closer. So, that was that natural progression. And honestly, predators took that, for me too. I still enjoy trapping, and trapping is a blast, but that, I want to interact with them on a personal level. Sounds odd, but to me, it is kind of personal, because you're trying to call that animal and you're watching it sometimes, or you're blind calling where they don't see you. And you're hoping that you've read sign enough and know enough about that particular predator that they're in the area you're hunting. And then you're trying to call them in range. So for me, it was the same progression. A rifle is a blast. And I still, please don't misunderstand, I still do a lot of it with a rifle and a shotgun.
Yeah. Oh yeah, absolutely.
But the desire to go out with a bow, whether that was a crossbow, a compound, and my favorite, of course, the recurve for predators, was, man, if it's neat shooting a coyote at 150 yards coming into a call, what's it going to be like to shoot one at 20 yards with a bow? And so that was really that next step for me was, okay, this is fun. And I feel like I've gotten, pretty reasonably, I've had some reasonable success with this. Now I want to make it even more difficult. And I took that, I dive into things, and, I took that to the next level. Like, I want to I want to shoot a jackal in Africa with my recurve. I want to go after, badger with a bow. I want to shoot bobcats with a bow and coyotes and everything. So I've been very fortunate to have harvested a lot of different predators where I went out and said, man, I'm gonna go and try and do this with my bow.
I was going to ask you this later in the podcast, but it's a good time to ask you now. What's the most interesting animal you've ever targeted with the bow? Like, you've hunted around the world. You mentioned Africa and a couple other places. What's the thing that jumps out to you when I ask you that? Like, it's just instantly memorable.
Well, because you said jump out at me, that's funny, because I'm probably going to share a story that it's embarrassing. And if you ever watch the video, it's very embarrassing for me. A lot of people think it's funny because I like to think I'm kind of a brave guy, that I'm not too scared. But I have video of me not being brave at all. I was actually hunting Kodiak with my recurve, and I've been charged. I've gotten mauled by an alligator, charged by leopards, charged by brown bears. I've had some crazy experiences in the field. And I've handled most of them, I thought, pretty well. I didn't run. I didn't, drop my weapon and go screaming off in the bushes. But on this hunt, I did. And it was, I was on Kodiak. I was hunting with my recurve, and I had taken 2 beautiful Sitka blacktails with my bow close, and it was a lot of fun. And that's on MOTV as well. But I wanted to go call foxes, and I wanted to take my recurve. And Captain Garrett was like, man, there's the biggest brown bears in the world, in Kodiak, and you're going to be calling sounded like a wounded animal. So just please be careful and be cognizant of what's around. And, of course, I'm like, oh man, I know what I'm doing. No problem. I'll keep an eye out for bears, and I'll take a shotgun, with me as well, to be just, for protection, because I am going to be calling and sounding like a wounded animal. And we had already seen a lot of brown bears. But my goal was to try and call in one of they call them silver foxes, but they're black. They look like they're, almost all black. And I really wanted to take call in a couple foxes. So I had my recurve, arrow nocked right here against the rock, and I had a shotgun with me as well. And I was using a mount call, and my cameraman was behind me, and I picked what I thought, Mark, was the perfect location. Yep. I could see down the beach. So if we called in a brown bear, I could stop calling, or we could hide behind the rock, and try and figure that situation out. And my cameraman was behind me, and I know him, and he was definitely checking our back. He was checking our 6, if you will. He was like, man, if a brown bear comes running back here, I'm going to let you know. So we're kind of watching the beach, but we had a big, huge rock to our left. So like a cliff almost, if you will. And then one of the rocks had come down and was almost like a bench right in front of me. So I had my recurve and my shotgun, and I'm leaning forward against the rock, and I'm wailing away on this thing, just trying to call in a fox. And Mark, you almost have to watch the video, but the only way I could describe it is I thought a brown bear was going to kill me, because all of a sudden I see not like far away, 12 inches to 24 inches from my face, this ball of hair just comes at me. And you would think that as a hunter that's been a lot of experience, I would have grabbed my weapon first. I was like, I jumped backwards away from both my weapons, which made my cameraman like, oh, great. Yeah, Fred's going to get us both killed. I jumped back. It was a black fox that I had called in, and it came up and stood on this and had no fear, and it's growling at me. And I'm like, oh my gosh. Like, once I realized it was a fox, not only did I feel silly, but then I realized that my weapon was closer to the fox than it was to me. So now I go forward to get my recurve, and the fox starts to go around the rock, and he's still growling. He's upset. He came in to eat something. And as I get to my recurve, the fox starts to take off, and he's going back up this cliff. Yep. So then I switched at that point. It would have been awesome if I'd have been holding the recurve and shot him at, a couple feet. But I grabbed the shotgun. I ended up shooting this beautiful fox. But the video is embarrassing, and that's on MOTV. It's on the Sitka blacktail hunt. But that was probably one of the wildest, craziest. When you say jump out at me, I think of that fox just scaring me to death. And, I've called in mountain lions. I've had some incredible experiences where, using electronic calls, I had a mountain lion 16 yards from my cameraman. So I've had all kinds of really unique experiences, but a lot of it's because I spend so much time in the field.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And that's a great story. And obviously you have spent so many years predator hunting. And, I think one of the things when you think of predator hunting is, if you hunt with a firearm, you might think, well, it's almost impossible to get an animal to come in to say 30, 40, or in your case, 20, 10 yards. I think most people are afraid to take that step and maybe try it with a bow. So let's talk a little bit about what you did as you were going through the evolution of predator hunting. How did you start to fine tune your setups and your calling and things like that? So say if you mentioned you shoot a coyote at 150, 200 yards, what did you start to do differently so you could get those animals into 30, 40, sometimes 20 yards? You had to probably tinker with a lot of things to start to be uber successful.
You know what? That's a great question, Mark. And there was a lot of things. And I think I wouldn't have been very successful at all had I not spent so much time with a rifle, calling in predators, shooting them from a distance. And I had a little experience under my belt to where I was like, okay, I feel like I've learned enough to where I can take this next step and try and do it that way. So I employ all kinds of different strategies. Some of them aren't as exciting as others, but I will employ all kinds of strategies to try and get predators in range. One that I've used successfully is baiting. In a lot of states, and I tell everybody, always check the regulations before you do anything, whether it's night hunting, predator hunting, make sure you're going to be on the right side of the law. And most game wardens are more than happy to go through the laws with you and regulations. But in Colorado here, we can bait, for predators. So not big game. We can't bait bears and we can't bait lions, but we can bait, fox, and we can bait coyotes, and we can bait raccoons. And if a skunk comes in, awesome. So some of the things that I did to get some experience and figure out wind and how to set up was baiting is a super effective way to get an animal in range, of a bow, whether that's a recurve or a crossbow or a compound. And I needed that really close range shot. So to have a stagnant animal is another advantage. And when they're at a bait site, once they settle down or they come into the actual bait, you can usually have an animal that's more stationary, maybe moving a little bit or interacting with other animals as they come in, but you've got a more stationary animal. So it makes it a lot easier. It's advantageous. So that's a great way. All the other things are super important. Knowing the wind direction, knowing if the wind's going to change. I still employ a lot of things that I used when I was rifle hunting. I want the sun preferably at my back. There's a lot of little things that, I'm like, I got to make sure I have good cover. I've got to make sure my equipment is quiet. Even, a safety on a crossbow, or, making sure you don't have any squeak on your compound, when you draw it back. If that arrow makes the tiniest noise on the rest, or if you're not wearing quiet clothing, I'm a huge fan of wearing stuff that's quiet, doesn't make any noise when you draw your bow. All kinds of little things, clearing the area out around your feet, making sure you're comfortable, whether that's a comfortable chair with a back where you can sit for long periods of time without moving. So there's all these, I tell people that predator hunting, whether it's with a rifle or even more so with a bow, there's not one thing that'll make you super successful. It's a whole bunch of little things that may be 10% of the hunt. So 10% is super quiet. 10% is knowing where the wind is. 10% is having the sun in your favor and not the animals. 10% is being able to shoot accurately enough. 10% is having an animal in a position and stationary enough to make the shot. But when you add all those up, all of a sudden you go, wow, now I got 90% of those variables covered.
Yeah, and it all becomes so important.
So that's one strategy, baiting. And then water holes. If I'm in arid country, with Texas, Colorado, Wyoming, I've harvested multiple predators over water. Coyotes, antelope hunting. I always have guys talk about, oh man, we had coyotes hitting this water hole or that water hole. And I constantly am paying attention to that. Like, oh, there's a place I can take advantage of a coyote at. So, water holes is another one that can be super effective. May not work across the whole country, but there's certain areas where a water hole can be a very effective tool to get a predator in bow range. And again, have that shot where they're standing there. When I'm calling predators and I'm using a recurve or a compound or a crossbow, when I'm calling predators, full camo's huge, but you also need shooting positions. I've seen some people get tucked in so far where their shooting hole's that big and the animal's standing right here at 20 yards and they don't have the shot. So again, back cover, super important, head to toe camouflage, wind position, and even knowing, like I try and pay attention, not only what's the weather or the sun position. A lot of times I'll set up, for example, before the sun comes up. And of course, I've got good back cover and everything looks great. But then when the sun comes up, where's the sun going to be positioned? Is it all of a sudden going to be lighting me up or my bow up or any equipment that I have up? Or am I in a position where even if I sit there for 2 or 3 hours or 45 minutes, is the sun going to come up and still be blocked? You know what I mean? Whether it's by a natural obstacle, a mountain, a bush, whatever. So, when I'm calling, a lot of the same things that you do with a rifle apply, but to me it's, then I'm looking at things like, do I have clearance for my bow? Can I turn and make a shot if I need to? A chair that pivots. I carry a lot of gear, when I'm bow hunting because it's extra stuff. But I've found that a chair that'll swivel 360 degrees or at least 180's key, a quiet chair. There's a bunch of chairs out there. I like a Millennium just because it's got a back to it and I like being comfortable. I start with an arrow knocked on the string. I'm ready. I'm ready to shoot. Minimal movement once the animal comes in. That's a mistake people make with bows and rifles, not being ready for that opportunity, because another 6 inches of movement could be what blows the gig. So a bow stand a lot of times important because I'll have the bow up already pointing in the direction of the animal. An arrow knock's important. Sometimes, if I'm shooting the compound, I'll even have the release already hooked up. Little tiny things, Mark, make that huge difference. And then if I haven't bored you yet, I'll go into some of the calls.
That was going to be my next question. Yeah,
I'll let you hit me with it, but I'll go.
Yeah, you talked about obviously things that are important like movement, sound, obviously wind. When you're bow hunting, you've really got to play the wind. And like you said, coyotes are notorious for getting downwind and trying to scent check everything. But yeah, I was going to start with the question is like, I know you do a lot with hand and mouth calls, but like, what do you do if you're still using an electronic call or your positioning and things like that? How do you change your calling technique? So please go for it.
So there's a lot of things. And you just, one of those, I try and fool as many senses on a predator as I can. So a lot of people just think, oh, I'm just going to blow a call, whether it's a mouth call, electronic call. I'm old enough to remember I started out with the old cassette calls. So I've watched it go through the whole thing. But, I'm trying to fool as many senses as I can. So a call, of course, is fooling the ears, making them think that they either think sex, food, or curiosity. When I'm setting up a call, those are the 3 things that'll bring them in. So it may be, coyote howling, maybe, puppy in distress. I may be using a food call, a curiosity call, like, a dying rabbit, a dying woodpecker, something like that.
Uh-huh.
So the call has their ears fooled. Then I want to fool their eyes, something subtle. Some of the decoys on the market are great. The problem is some of the decoys on the market are great for rifles because you're going to shoot it before the predator gets really close to the decoy. When you're bow hunting, you need to have a super quiet decoy. If it sounds unnatural or it's going, making noise or grinding motion, those don't work out so great. Sometimes they're worked up, they'll still grab it, but I'm looking for something that's quiet. Another one that's easy, the guys from Burnham came out and they were like, man, we've just used a turkey feather, and they're 100% right. You can use something as simple as a feather on a string. And even on that, though, you have to check. Sometimes you can't use like migratory bird feathers, so a lot of times I'll use like a chicken feather from one of my domestic chickens. But you can literally put a stick in the ground and there's almost always some type of breeze. But you can tie a couple feathers together, have a cluster of feathers on a little lightweight, 4 pound, 6 pound piece of fishing line, and the smallest breeze is going to make it move. But now you've got their eyes fooled. So you got your call to fool the ears. Now you've got your movement to fool their eyes. So now they're like, man, this is legit. It's looking like everything I want to see. especially on pressured predators. The third thing I do is I'll go with scent. So as a trapper, I learned a long time ago how important scent was to being able to position an animal where you needed it. If it wasn't for scent, trappers wouldn't do any good. Doesn't matter whether it's a water, animal, beavers. There's certain things you can set walk-through sets, but scent, whether it's a urine post set, dirt hole set, or anything else, scent is huge. So I'll use coyote scent, rabbit scent. I'll use scents that are natural to them to help convince them that everything's legit. And part of that is, so now I've got 3 senses fooled. I've got their ears, I've got their eyes, and I've got their nose. That's huge for keeping that animal in that position so you can make the shot. If they stay there for another 2 seconds, sometimes that's all you need. But I'm also very scent conscious with my call. I don't want my call to be stinky. So I'll put scent on my call and I'll try and keep it from, smelling like a person. And again, these are things that even if it holds them there for another second or two, same with the decoy, I'll put scent usually on the decoy. So if I have them run up, I want them to stay there for a second or two. I want them to give me time to get that shot. I'm also really careful about how I approach where I want to set the call. I love an electronic call for everything. Don't get me wrong. Mouth calls are great. They certainly have their place, and I've harvested a lot of animals with a mouth call. But there's no denying the advantage of a e-call or electronic call, because then the animal's focused on the call and the decoy and the scent. That's not where you're at. When you're blowing a mouth call, they're focused on you and trying to get away with drawing a bow, moving, doing any of that's very, very difficult. But when you have that e-call out there, you've switched it up. You've got all the advantages. And again, the decoy, to me, really helps keep animals from circling as much. When they just hear the sound, a lot of times you'll get them circling. I know I'm covering a lot here, but you'll catch them circling more to smell that animal or smell that wounded animal and go in. A decoy, a lot of times, just like a decoy with an elk or something else, a deer. A lot of times that decoy will cause them to go, oh, there it is right there. I'm going to ignore the wind. I see what I'm after, and go straight to it. So I tend to bring my call in closer, so maybe 30 yards, to where if it goes directly to the call, I'm still in range. I can still make that shot with, a recurve. That's pushing recurve a little bit, but compound and crossbow. With the recurve, I'll tuck it in even closer. But then I'm trying to fool everything else. I'm now hoping that they're going to come straight into the call. But even if they duck it and try and swing in downwind a little, there's a chance that they'll still cut in between the call and me, and I'll have a super close shot. So that's just some of the, there's a whole lot of variables. And that's why I say it's a whole bunch of little things. But besides the way you set up, fooling as many senses as you can and setting up to where the advantage is yours for that shot, not only close range, but also the animal focused on that call, that decoy, and that scent, than they are on spotting something else.
Well, thank you for covering all of that. I mean, you have a lifetime of tips and tactics that you can share and that you have shared there. As you were talking, it got me thinking, have you found there's a certain time of the year that's more advantageous for hunting with bow and arrow? Like, is there a time of the year where it might be a little easier to get them in that close than other times?
Great question, Mark. So it depends on what I'm doing. So water holes work best in the summer. And since a lot of my predator hunting sometimes is just to help not only myself or ranchers out and trying to manage a predator, I just make it more fun. So if I've got too many coyotes or we lose a couple calves, I may go, okay, what's the best way to harvest a couple of these coyotes to where I enjoy it too and I have fun. So water holes are going to work best in the summer. Both baits and calling, to me, work best, and I'll have to hedge that a little. Generally, calling and baits work best in the winter. And I say that because animals, just like us, they have to increase their caloric intake. They have to take in more food to keep warm, to keep their energy up, to keep fat stores. So that's when they're more apt to come running into, a food sound. That's when they're more apt to come in and you can take advantage of a bait, because almost all predators will take advantage of carrion, especially if they're hungry, if they find a dead animal out there. The mating, like the the vocalizations and things like that can be great in the spring. I've used coyote decoys. I've got a Montana coyote decoy that I've used with some success too, especially when coyotes are pairing up. So a decoy can be advantageous. It's got a realistic looking tail. I think that makes a huge difference because they spot that. And again, it's almost like a decoy out there. But it's those little nuances, as well as, so those are my favorite times to do it, that winter time from, depending on where you're at, November to February. The other plus of that is also, as you know, I like to sell hides. I like to work hides. I think that's the ultimate form of respect for the animal, is caring for that hide as well. But the hides are going to be more prime in that, time of year as well. But the other thing, if I was trying to share everything with you, every animal is a little different, and knowing that animal's personality. In other words, where I may set up on a coyote to have it in a little more open area, I may totally change my strategy a little bit for a bobcat that's going to take advantage of any cover. So whereas I may set up, by one tree, let's say I've got a point of trees coming out, and that point of trees comes out, and for a coyote, a lot of times I'd sit on the end of the point of trees, put my call out in front, and I'm hopefully going to call the coyote out from maybe the open range or other trees out in front. For a bobcat, however, that bobcat is going to approach from where I'm sitting. If there's a little point of trees that comes out into a meadow or an opening or anything like that, a bobcat takes longer to come into a call. But when a bobcat slips into a call, it's going to take advantage of any cover it has. So even if it's a wounded animal it hears, it's 95% of the time going to hook around and go through those trees. And all of a sudden you'll see a bobcat sitting right beside you because it's coming in where you're approaching from. So in that case, I almost switch it up. I'd put the call behind me. I would set up in the point of trees, and I would try and catch that bobcat that's coming in. So a lot of it's just calling a lot of animals and watching how they approach calls. Foxes as well. If you're hunting a fox, especially in areas where you've got a lot of predatory birds, bald eagles, golden eagles, we have both those, where you've got coyotes, bobcats. I've watched bobcats, try and predate on fox. So foxes are going to be a little more leery, especially if you're calling them in the daytime, morning or evening, as opposed to night when it comes to coming out in those openings. So I would tend to hunt them closer brush, little draws where they'll feel more comfortable and can just take a couple hops and they'll be in cover. So, again, it's multifaceted, but there's not a one thing fits all, if you will. It varies based on the predator, and learning about how those predators move can make it so much more advantageous when you decide to take on the challenge of bow hunting a predator. And a trapper that taught me a lot about trapping gave me some of the best advice I could ever hear, because we were checking a trap and I said, "Why did you set that trap there?" And he literally said, "Follow it." I went, "Why?" He goes, backtrack the fox and take a look at what he did before he got here. Like, okay. So I took off and started following the fox track backwards and just paying attention where the fox went. You know what I mean? Why, was he looking in a culvert for a rabbit? Yep, sure did. Did he cut across the open field, or did he cover along the field edge? When he went across the field, did he cut through the little ditch with brush in it? Or, so a lot of times, even if you're not hunting, paying a lot of attention to animals, where you see them, what time of day it is. I'm constantly, as people, we're constantly learning from when we're born. And it depends on what we're concentrating or paying attention to. But I'm constantly trying to watch, even if I'm driving down the road and I'm like, "Oh, there's a coyote. Huh, why is he there? What time of day is it? Why is he cutting across the field there? What's the wind doing?" Just looking at different things, or where I see bobcats, or where I see raccoon tracks along creeks. So I tell people a lot of it is you can't read one article, you can't watch one, what video. You'd have to read a lot of articles, which magazines like Predator Nation can teach you a lot. But read all you can, watch all you can. There's some great videos out there, but also learn on your own a lot and pay attention to those little tiny nuances. And as you learn those, it'll make you a lot better, especially as you go after different predators. sorry for the long-winded deal there, Mark, but I get excited about it. It's one of my passions, so I can't help but rattle on.
No, that's absolutely phenomenal, and you've covered so much. And when you think about it, this is a great episode for people who maybe have thought about getting out with a bow and arrow to try going after predators and maybe didn't know where to get started. So thank you for that. And since we're talking about that, it's probably good to ask you now, if you wouldn't mind, what is your current setup if you go out with a compound for predators? And then I know you're going to want to talk about the recurve as well. So what's your current setup that you're using when you hunt with a compound for, say, coyotes and foxes and bobcats? Do you have a go-to setup?
Yeah, you know what? It's pretty much, and it's because that's what I'm comfortable with. I go with the same setup that I use for big game. And I do that because I'm familiar with it. I hunt with it all the time. I'm familiar with the trajectory. My equipment's always ready to be quiet, because I'm hunting whitetails or other animals with it. So I tell guys, when you switch over and decide to go for some predators, don't change your equipment. Don't change your arrow. Don't change your broadhead. I have some guys go, "Oh man, should I shoot a different broadhead?" I'm like, no, why would that's like, don't change what you're familiar with. Stick with what you're familiar with, stick with the same bow, stick with the same pins. I would go with the same stuff. Now, my compound is a little lighter than most, but that's advantageous to me because I can draw it very smoothly. It's 55 pounds on the bear compound that I'm shooting, but it's super light because I can literally, I can just draw it straight back, smooth. I don't have to, put it up in the air and jerk it down to, to get it drawn. The tough thing about a compound on predators, and it makes it a little more of a challenge, which is fun, is that you do have that breakover. And once you get it down, if you don't get the shot, but the animal's still interacting with the decoy or the call or the bait or even a water hole, at some point you've got to let it down. And that letting it down is usually a little bit of a pop. So believe it or not, a lot of times, longbows or recurs will give guys an advantage in that situation, because a lot of times I'll come back a quarter of the way and then I could just let it down real slow with minimal movement. Come back. Oh, nope, the shot's not there. Oh, and then when I get the shot, come back smoother. So I'm certainly not trying to discourage anybody from going with a compound. The great thing about, predators with a bow of any type is that you obviously want that extra challenge. You want to try and make that happen. So instead of looking at it like a huge disadvantage, I look at it like, oh, that's another part of the challenge. You know what I mean? I've got to try and figure out exactly when to draw that compound, because I got to get that shot within 30 seconds, or boy, if I'm feeling really strong that day, maybe 45 seconds, as long as I can hold it back and still make an accurate shot. So I look at that as part of that challenge, is figuring out, watching that animal, reading the animal's behavior. When do I need to draw to try and get that shot and not have the animal see me?
Yeah, no, that's great advice. And I wanted to ask you one thing, if you don't mind. We don't have to talk about this a lot, but you mentioned a couple of times now hunting over bait. And I was just curious, do you hunt out of a blind when you're hunting over bait? Do you still prefer using the natural setup? And if you already mentioned that, I'm sorry I missed that. But I mean, I thought that was a great question when you're in a stationary position.
That's a great question. And I've actually done both. I've hunted over bait where I just sit down on the ground. I've hunted over bait where I, haul a chair in and get comfortable and build a little brush around me, because where the bait's positioned, maybe there's not cover. I put tree stands up. I've done all kinds of stuff. And then the ones that, we shot the other night, we actually we drug, carcasses in front of a muddy blind. It was about 10 degrees, and we had a little buddy heater every once in a while we would kick on to make it nice and warm in the insulated blind. So, I had a client that day and he was comfortable, so it allowed him to sit longer, and thus I could sit longer as well. So great question on the bait. And like I said, I'll use anything I can take advantage of: calls, bait, water holes. But I tell a lot of guys, bait is probably the easiest. If somebody said, Fred, I'm going to give you $100, or I'll bet you $100 you can't shoot a predator tonight or in the daytime, and you've got a week to prepare, or get your setup ready. What are you going to go to? I'm going to go in the winter. I'm going to go with a bait, and I'm going to probably go on the ground. I'm going to brush a blind in, you know what I mean? Because I don't want to have time for an animal to get used to a big permanent blind. And I'm gonna shoot one with a recurve, a compound, or a crossbow that way. I'm gonna set it up because I'm gonna take advantage of the wind, and I'm going to try and have a natural obstacle downwind. So the animal almost has to approach where I have the advantage, where it can't wind me and where I can see it coming. So yeah, great question on the bait. I've done it every way you can do it. But that is a very efficient way to also get started hunting predators, with a bow, because I've had raccoons, fox, coyote. I've had all kinds of different predators, come into baits, and it gives you a really good opportunity to get a shot. Yeah, it's a great way to start it out.
A great point. And you think of it, it is a good way when you're making that transition. So thank you for that. Now, I know you have a guy or two in camp here, so I'm going to wrap up with this last question for you, Fred. And that's whether you tackle this as any animal or predator, what's the most unique thing you've gone after in your career? And again, you've hunted around the globe and you've been hunting a long time. What's the most unique animal you've ever gone after?
Animal total or predator?
I'm going to let you do it either way.
Okay. Man, there's been a bunch of unique ones. Predator-wise, dingo was really unique and special. It's hard to break it down to one, but hyenas, because I think they're incredible. They have one of the most powerful jaws of any animal, foot-pounds of pressure. So that was fun. Coatimundi, that's another crazy one that a lot of people don't even know that we have here in the United States. I mean, I was hunting coatimundis in Arizona. There's coatimundi's a neat one. One that I wrote an article for in Predator Nation, as you know, is the ringtail cat. An absolutely beautiful predator that drove me crazy, like almost made me give up predator hunting. That's an exaggeration, but the ringtail cat for me was such a challenge. And I realized how difficult it was here in Southern Colorado when I asked one of the local game wardens that I respect that hunts, not only hunts quite a bit, but, watches a lot of animals. I said, have you seen any ringtail cats? And he had seen one in over a 30-year career. Like, Fred, I've seen one. And I'm like, oh my gosh. But then you talk to other people that are like, yeah, I saw two. So the ringtail cat, super unique. Coatimundi, super unique. Those are two that if you've never heard of that and you're listening to this podcast, look up a ringtail cat. Take the time to Google a coatimundi. They are two of probably the most unique predators, in my opinion, that don't get much credit because they are so unique, and most people don't see that we have here in the United States. So both of those are pretty cool and unique.
Well, I'm going to let you get back to the hunters you have in camp, but I want to thank you, Fred, so much. It's a thrill to have you on. For everybody who is listening, check out Fred's shows on MOTV, and good luck if you want to try something different as you transition out of the fall hunting season. Give predator hunting with the bow and arrow a chance this winter. We're coming into a great time of the year for that. So, Fred, thank you. Good luck with the rest of your hunting season, and good luck with your predator hunting this winter.
Mark, thank you so much. It was a pleasure, buddy.
Thanks for downloading the Petersen's Bowhunting Podcast. All bow hunting, all the time. Pick up the latest issue of Petersen's Bowhunting Magazine on your local newsstand, or connect with us online at bowhuntingmag.com.